Good afternoon, everybody. It's heartening to see so many people over here at 2 o'clock, and you've had your lunch. So it's my job to keep you awake for the next 15 minutes in the interest of the next few speakers. So I'm sorry I'm having to carry a script. I generally wouldn't like to do that, but I just put together something. Till yesterday, I didn't know what I'd be speaking on, so I put together something so I have a script, and pardon me for this. But then, when Rohit gave me this topic, I was wondering what to speak on. So, ophthalmology is, bring it up. Is that better? Yeah. So, ophthalmology is progressing at a breakneck speed as far as scientific advances and innovations are concerned. And we need to ask the right questions to catalyze this change. So, we need to seize the opportunity, the situations, and our questions have to be meaningful. And we have to know how to ask these questions, why to ask these questions, when to ask these questions. And opportunities like the questions Clinix are the right place to make this happen. These are new formats. These encourage questions. So, now the entire practice of medicine is based on one question that we ask every day. Can somebody tell me what is that question we ask every day? Our entire practice of medicine is based on one question. That's your question. How do we heal this person? Is the only question we are asking day in and day out in our entire practice of medicine. So, a creative person is basically full of questions. They're driven by doubt, by amazement, by curiosity. They do not want to make assumptions. They question everything. Voltaire said that you judge a person by the questions he asks rather than the answers he gives. So, we need to ask questions at every opportunity, because that way we find not only the problems, actually we find the problems and the solutions both. This will not stay in place, looks like. Okay, so now Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, said, "We run this company on the basis of questions and not answers." So, if questioning is such a powerful tool, why doesn't everybody ask questions? Again, why doesn't everybody ask questions? So many people in the audience, why doesn't everybody ask questions? So, some are basically lazy. Others are driven by their own assumptions and they know it already, so they don't need to ask questions. And then some are in a great hurry, so they don't have the time. It's going to kind of slow them down, so they don't want to ask questions. They want to move on to the next thing. But then what is the single most thing that prevents people from asking questions? What is that single most thing? Most people are afraid that when you ask a question, it's going to expose your ignorance. You're going to look small. So that is the inhibition. That is what prevents people from asking questions. On the contrary, actually, asking questions is being brave. It suggests that you are curious. And in fact, like I said, most innovative people, most thinkers, take it for granted that they don't know everything, and that's why they ask questions. They ask questions day in and day out. They are restless because these are these questions which go on in their mind. So, it's a sign of strength and intelligence. So, if you stay in the same room, it's going to lead you to the same open doors. Now, unless you get out of those doors and get into the next room and try to open new doors, you are not going anywhere. So, that's why we need to keep asking questions. Now, how do we ask questions? We need to practice asking questions. It's something which has to be practiced initially, then it becomes a habit, and we get better and better at doing that. So, it's advisable to start with open-ended questions, broad questions, which allow the person who's being asked the question to respond freely. Now, let's say I am into refractive surgery, and I'm curious, and I want to ask Dr. Rupal, who's just walked in, or Dr. Sri Ganesh, as to the merits of smile over LASIK. And if I go and pose a question like, isn't LASIK a better procedure than smile? Now I'm straight away killing any chance of getting a good answer. And I could make it worse by saying, in my experience, I'm getting consistently good results with LASIK. Don't you think so? So I have just shot down any chance of getting a good answer. So a preferred approach would be to ask broad questions, open questions. You could go and say, what's your preferred refractive procedure these days? Now, when you ask someone like Dr. Rupal or Dr. Sri Ganesh or somebody who are, or the experienced faculty over here, a question like that, you just need to sit back and relax after that. Because after that, they are going to take over, and you just got to soak in the information that's coming. And just to keep that conversation going, you can keep asking a why, how, once in a while, just to keep that conversation going and let them know that you are in the conversation, and the information will keep flowing. In the next 15, 20 minutes, I would be a more educated refractive surgeon than what would have been if I'd asked a closed-ended question. So, and we have this temptation to plunge in and offer our opinions before we get the answers. We must resist from doing that. It's more important to listen and get those answers rather than offer our opinion. That was not what we started out with. We wanted to know more. So, creative thinkers often ask, open-ended questions like this. Perhaps, maybe, probably, these are the common words that creative thinkers, because they allow room for improvement, room for thought. So that's how questions have to go. Now, once we have mapped out the flow of thoughts, then we can probably move to more narrow questions. Now, let's say I'll keep bringing Dr. Rupal into the discussion. So let's say I was going ahead with this conversation with Dr. Rupal, and now we have had a little bit of conversation and have learned a little bit about smile, and I want to have a more specific answer. So I could ask, okay, which one gives you better visual recovery? That's after I've heard about their opinion. So that's a more narrow question where I'm compelling the responder to give a more specific answer. That's how we would like questions to move. Now, it's not that closed-ended or fixed questions don't have a place. Now, if you're in the audience and you're going to ask a question to the faculty, you really need to ask closed-ended specific questions, because in the interest of time, in the interest of everybody's time, because you want to drive that conversation or that dialogue in a particular direction. So that's when you ask very specific questions. Now, what are the risks of asking questions? There are risks. You may appear to be too inquisitive, or people may perceive you as intrusive. So it's better to not ask threatening, not make your language, body language, or language as such threatening. So it's better to be, I mean, you don't need to lunge forward or, you know, jab your finger in the air. So we need to be more relaxed and let the responder not be intimidated. So now we need to now also see that our questions are not very accusing. Now, if I were to ask a colleague, are you responsible for this complication? Now, that's straight away an accusing question, so I am not going to get a useful answer. Instead, if I were to ask, what do you think went wrong? How do you think this happened? I'm likely to get the same response that I wanted, but in a much better way. That person knows that I'm not accusing, I'm not pointing a finger, so that person is more, let's say, that I have created a more conducive environment for the person to give an answer. So now it's the ability to pose meaningful and often deceptively simple questions is the hallmark of creativity. Now, we're going to have debates, discussions in these 2 days. If in brainstorming sessions, if we could suspend our judgments, leave our baggage of judgments behind, and come to a discussion, the discussions are always more meaningful. You allow more creativity among all participants. They know that, okay, everybody knows that the other person has an open mind and is receptive to the questions or the responses. So you suspend your judgments in a brainstorming session, and you're likely to get a more productive outcome. So when we examine our brilliant ideas, and that's something which I come to always, and if you're examining our brilliant ideas, we need to ask a few very specific questions. Will this change the user or customer experience? Now, we need a yes to at least one of the 3 questions. Will this be competitive enough? Or will this change the economic structure of the industry? So we need an answer as a yes to at least one of these questions when you have a brilliant idea. And actually, to go further, you need an answer as a yes to both the questions as to, does my idea have a serious contribution in the space, and does this really generate sufficient business? These are the 2 questions which need to have a yes as an answer. Another way to approach ideation is to ask who, what, and how. So who is going to benefit from your idea? What is the unmet need that your idea is trying to address? And how are you going to take this idea from concept to fruition? So let's make questioning a habit. And let me tell you, as we make it a habit, it can be addictive. I don't know how many of you have experienced this. I've often been in a talk, prepared and spent a lot of time and money to go to a talk, and within a minute of the speaker starting, something triggers a question, and we are transported to somewhere else, and I am taking notes and doing things. So it can be very addictive. So we need to balance both the curiosity and the need to answer these questions. So just to give you a brief guideline to developing questions, We need to plan our questions. We need to have a purpose. We need to be respectful of the responder's time. We need to have specific questions. We need to have a particular flow in our questions. And like I said, we start with broad questions and narrow it down slowly to more specific questions. We need to listen without butting in and putting in our own opinion. And we shouldn't interrupt, and we need to transition naturally as we ask these questions. So, as I end this, so let me just remind you, it's asking questions which is more powerful than answering questions. Thank you for your attention.